I have a question, but so you said that unchanging doesn't mean permanent. Are there permanent things?
Oh, well, that's your homework, but do you guys want to do it? We can just do it.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see, what can I erase? Keep that. Yeah, we can erase this. We all know that now. Erase that. That's pretty good. One, two, three, four. So this one will be what did we say?
Unchanging.
Yeah. And this one will be impermanent. Okay. Okay. Cool. Did you just leave that running? Dad,
I'm sorry?
did you just leave that running?
No, I just started it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Joel wants to do the homework now. That's fine. All right. Can you give me an example of something which is neither unchanging nor impermanent? So that would mean something which is changing and permanent. That's a tough one, actually. Changing thing that never goes away.
Yeah, I think it's a sentence you might say about yourself or something. No,
Mind stream.
that's yeah.
Yeah, Ted got it. Mind stream. Your mind is always changing, but it never stops. Your mind just keeps going and going and going. And to totally accept that, then you have to do course 4. That's past and future lives. But the mind never stops thinking. The mind is always thinking about some new object. So it's always changing and it never stops, never started. So neither unchanging nor impermanent is mind stream. Can you think of something which is unchanging but not impermanent? So that would be unchanging. Wait a minute, is that what I just did? Neither unchanging nor impermanent. Oh no, yeah. So now unchanging but permanent. It was in our list. Space.
Yeah, space.
Yeah, that's space. Space doesn't change, doesn't go away. Right? Can you think of something which is both unchanging and impermanent? In the list again.
Emptiness.
Emptiness or facts? Yeah. Because they are unchanging, but they do go out of existence. Okay. Then can you think of anything which is impermanent but changing? That's everything else, yeah. Pretty much. That's everything else in the universe. Doesn't last and is always changing. So, cat, dog, oh, and a monkey. Okay. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's Mushi, which basically, oh, I should tell you the point. That's the point of, one of the points. So when you play the Mushi Musum game, what benefit do you get? You know, if you figure out whether something is 4 possibilities or 3 possibilities, what's the benefit? Well, this one, you know, it's a set. It's a one-way relationship of dependence, and we'll talk about that more later. If it's this one, what you know is it's not a cause and effect relationship. Anything which is Mushi, which is anything which has all 4 possibilities, that's not a cause and effect relationship. So, like for example, if we did, has everybody got that?
Mm-hmm.
Let's do. Let's do my favorite one, right? Hard work and money. All right. So do you know somebody who doesn't work hard and doesn't have money? I always say my cousin. You know, there's always like one guy in your family who's like always, you know, bumming around, never works, is always asking people for money. Can you think of anybody who works hard but doesn't have money?
Mhm.
And I would say, yeah, me. Just kidding. Maybe not. Then can you think of somebody who works hard and has money?
Mhm.
Yeah, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or something like that. Can you think of somebody who has money but doesn't work hard? Yeah, then I say trust fund baby or somebody hits the lottery or something like that. All right, so if it's Mu-Chi, all four possibly exist, what do you know? It's not a cause and effect relationship. There's no cause and effect relationship between hard work and money.
Oh.
And we'll talk about it can be a contributing factor. We'll talk about that in another class. But there's no cause and effect relationship there. So now you have the syllogism and you have the Mu-Chi Mu-Sum proof that hard work is not the cause for money. And your own experience, which is the other way to know something. Okay. I thought we could run through this and just quiz you a little bit. Okay, so if I write, consider sound, it's changing because I like monkeys. True or false?
False.
How do you know?
Monkeys and sound.
Yeah, it fails test number 1. Right, what's test number 1?
1 and 3 are related.
Yeah, it has to be a relationship between 1 and 3, the subject and the reason. All right, is there a relationship between sound and the fact that I like monkeys?
Maybe you like the sound of monkeys.
Not really. Yeah, you can reach for it if you want, but again, we'll talk about how to do that tomorrow. But yeah, no, there's no relationship between the fact that I like monkeys and sound. Okay, so it would fail test number 1. What if I write in here? Why don't my pens like they work, and then they don't work? What if I say, consider sound, it's changing because it exists? True or false?
True.
Run the test.
Run the test! Yay! I can go home happy. Okay, what's test number 1?
Sound and English.
1 and 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Relationship between exist and sound. Do sounds exist? Like, does this sound exist? Yeah, it does. Perception of it, it exists. Okay. So pass test number 1. What's test number 2?
3 and 2.
Yeah, if 3 then 2. So if something exists, must it be changing?
No.
Now, how do you know?
Because it could be unchanging.
Yeah, you got this chart in the back of your mind, right? And you know half, not really actually half, but half your chart is unchanging things. So then you know this syllogism is going to fail. Right? See, if you have this chart in the back of your mind, then all this kind of stuff's just super, super easy. Like, is it true that if something exists, it must be changing? No, of course not, because half the things are unchanging. Facts, space, emptiness.
But it's very likely that if something exists, it is changing, right? But that doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter. Yeah. As much as we would like it to. Make our whole thing simpler. But now, this syllogism as it stands is false. So we can rewrite it, make it something else, which will make it true, which is what? Did I remember? How do I make? Let me just do it that way. How do we make this a true syllogism? What do we put in here? Yeah. Yeah. We look here at our category, right? What are our synonyms? Anything you put in here is going to be true, right? Because those are all equivalent. So I can say consider sound it's changing because it's made. I can say consider sound it's changing because it works. Either one of those is going to be fine. I can't say the rules. There's some rules of logic. We won't do a whole lot on this, but there are some, like, what do you call it? Details or the small print. You can't put this can't be the same, or I'm sorry, these two aren't supposed to be the same. So it wouldn't be a good syllogism to put consider sound as changing because it's changing. Like, maybe it's true, but it doesn't really. What does it tell you? There's no point to that, right? But we can take any of the things which are synonyms for changing, slap it in there, and your syllogism's good. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, another way how just having this framework in your mind, it makes all this kind of stuff easy. And then again, you know, when I tried to teach this without teaching that, it was a giant disaster. Yeah.
So if it's a Mu-Chi thing, then there's no cause and effect relationship.
Correct.
So does that mean that if you find a cause and effect relationship, it's the other one?
It won't
Set?
be Mu-Chi. Yeah.
And it'll be one of the other three? Or?
Correct. Correct. Because one of the four must be true. So. See, then that's great. See, then you start connecting things, which is what this is all about. You're going to start making connections in your mind, and you're going to start seeing things that actually nobody else can see, because these can't be seen with the eyeball. You know, as a culture, we're so attached to the notion of if I see it, I believe it, right? But there's lots of things that are important that you can't see. And that's reason number one, right, for studying logic. The emptiness, it's an important concept. You can't see it. The only way, I mean, you can see it. The only way to see it is to do it this way. You can't see it with your eyeball, right? But once you start thinking like this, and once you start doing that, then you start making all these connections. You start seeing things that other people are never going to see because they don't do the work. Make sense? Okay. All right. Well, we'll do some easy stuff now. Just going to give you some definitions and stuff, just so, again, some background information just to help you later. How do we know if something exists? Super important concept. Does anybody know the definition for existing thing?
It's labeled or known.
Well, that's a synonym, so that's pretty good, and that is kind of how they do definitions sometimes. But in Tibetan Buddhism, they say that the definition for existing thing is established by valid perception. Like I said, established by a valid perception. So how do I know this wall is white? Because I perceive it, because I'm looking at it. What are the three kinds of perception? Does anybody know?
Direct like that.
Yeah, direct. So that's, and I like to emphasize here too, basically that's any sense power. It's not just the eyeball. Again, we're obsessed with our eyes. But for example, how do you know you just heard a sound? Because you heard the sound. So any sense power that you use to perceive an object is a direct perception. It's not just eyeballs. So the first one's direct. What's the next one?
Inductive.
Yeah, I'm gonna say indirect here just to make it simpler, but those are equivalent basically. Direct and indirect perception. What's an indirect perception? That's this. That's what Josh just did. He had an indirect, or Joel, sorry, just had a indirect perception. When you figure something out with logic, when you find a correct syllogism, you saw something, but you didn't see it with any of your sense powers, right? You figured it out in your mind. So in logic, they say these are equivalent, that one's not more important than the other. That if you can establish something logically exists, it has the same ontological status as if you saw it. Which is really important. Okay. So definition of a valid perception is something, definition of existing is something seen by a valid perception. So if something isn't seen by a valid perception, that means that thing doesn't exist. Like, and the classic example in scripture is horns on a rabbit. So nobody's seen, unless you've done Photoshop and made a jackalope, you haven't seen horns on a rabbit. So then that thing doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? Because nobody's had a perception of it.
So that's the third perception?
Did I say 3 when I said I was going to give you 3? Yeah, damn, I didn't mean to do that. It's okay. Sometimes it's a list of 2, sometimes it's a list of 3.
Okay.
So I was supposed to stick to the list of 2, but I got excited. So the third one we say is authority. And the reason why you can say it's a list of 2 is because this one depends on that one. You're not, like we said before, you're not supposed to accept anything anybody says is true just because they said it. So if you want to accept somebody as an authority, you have to prove that that person is an authority. But then they say if you do that, if you prove that somebody's an authority, then again you have the same ontological status. You can say anything that they say you can accept as true, and that thing also exists. So like for example, if you believe the Dalai Lama is telling the truth and he's not someone that would lie about something, and he says, okay, reincarnation is true, then on that basis you could accept reincarnation. But you'd have to do the work to prove that that's something the Dalai Lama wouldn't lie about, which can be done, but it's also also some work. Does that make sense? So when it's a list of two, they just subsume this one inside that one, and we're going to do that later, but it's okay because this one doesn't exist without that one. Okay. Just for your guys' homework, the definition of unchanging is a thing that doesn't change moment by moment. It's not very complicated. And the examples are space and emptiness. We already knew that. Definition for unchanging we already did. Anything that changes moment to moment. The classic example in Tibetan Buddhism for a changing thing, does anybody know? Pumbaa? It's a pot. Because in ancient times, right, you didn't have running water. So you had to go take your pot, drag it to a well, fill it up, drag it back. So the water pot in your house was a very important object. So they use that as an example a lot. But then, because why? Water pot breaks, water pot runs out of water, it's a big problem for you, right? So nowadays, we'd probably use like laptop. My laptop breaks, it's a big freaking problem, I gotta work it out. Okay, we did that already. The definition of working thing, just so that you also have that available to you, is anything which performs a function. So anything that does something is something that works. The three kinds of changing things we already did: physical things, mental things, things which are neither. And I already kind of basically talked about this, but there's another way of looking at it. 4 schools. So did anybody know what are the 4 schools? What's the first one? Abhidharma, right? Which in English we'll call the detailist. They're called Abhidharma because they like details. What's the second one?
Sutras.
Yeah, sutras. They're called that because there's a sutra that they think is more correct than other ones, and so they base all their thoughts on that. What's the next one?
Mind only.
Yeah, mind only. Does mind only school think things only exist in your mind?
Mm-mm.
It depends. If anybody went to the Palampur teachings, or they listened to the teachings from Palampur, there's sub-schools to this school, and they have different views, and some of them actually do think everything is only your mind, and some of them don't. Geshe Michael used to make a big deal out of it doesn't necessarily mean that they think everything's only in your mind. And then what's the last one?
Middle way.
Yeah, middle way. And then middle way has what? Yeah, 2 parts. What's the first one? Svatantrika, yeah, which we usually translate as independent school. And then what's the last one? Yeah, Prasangika, which is consequence. Does anyone know what the difference between these two is, philosophically?
What's the last one called?
Consequence. So Prasangika, Telngir in Tibetan, means they're famous for they drop absurd consequences. Like they would say, if you walked up to them and you said, "Om is the eternal sound of the universe," they would say, "Oh, so I guess sounds aren't made." And in that school, they think that's enough, because you get a little taste for emptiness when somebody does that to you. If you're like, "Om is the eternal sound of the universe, so I guess sounds aren't made," and your mind goes, "What?" So they thought there was a benefit to doing that, so they used to walk around and do that to everybody.
The absurdity of it?
Yeah, absurd's good. Geshe Michael likes sarcastic. I'm not a big fan of sarcastic. I don't think, because we'll talk about it more when we get to the debating thing. Our motivation for this is always supposed to be what? To help people, right? Our goal debating and studying logic and everything, our motivation should always be to help people. And so I don't like sarcasm doesn't imply that. So the consequence is okay, or absurd is okay. Because what you're trying to do is get somebody to realize something, which will benefit them. Which I don't think that's really communicated by sarcasm. But one of the major philosophical differences between these two schools was, this school said, if you give somebody a good proof for emptiness, they have to accept it as true. Is that true? No. God, no. Yeah, I can write logic on the board all day long, and if somebody doesn't want to accept it, they won't. I can't make them. You know? So then this school said, no. Guess what? Logic is empty like everything else. You know? Whether logic helps somebody or hurts somebody, depends on what? Yeah, how you've treated people in the past. Right? So that's, I'd really like to maybe that's a good place to stop. I've had lots of friends study this, you know, and some people that were really good at it, and then eventually they always hit like a roadblock. And then whenever that happens, like with a student or something, and they say, I can't figure this out, like, what's the answer? What's the answer? What are they doing in that moment? They're grasping. You know, like, what is the answer? You know, it's not going to come to you if you do it that way. You know, whenever somebody's like doing a syllogism and they get stuck and they can't figure it out, I say, do Tong Lin. You know, it's a compassion meditation. So, like, meditate on compassion. Meditate on helping people. Meditate on taking care of somebody else. And then, like, one of two things will happen. One, the answer will pop in your mind. Or two, you realize it wasn't really a problem in the first place. But I've seen people just, you know, just like, what is the answer? Give it to me. You know, and then they never get there. They never get it. You know, and it's because these guys are right. It's all driven by your desire to help other people. So if you find yourself arguing with somebody and you get turned around and you realize you made a mistake, all right, well, that's because you lost your motivation. The motivation had to be that you wanted to help somebody. Our goal is always to just connect things for people. You know, I do some coaching now, and in coaching they teach you, you're not supposed to, if you're coaching somebody, you're not supposed to say, and this works for yoga too. Mira used to teach this in her yoga teacher training class. Like when you go to give somebody an assist, you're not supposed to walk up to them and think, oh God, they're all wrong. This is all bad. If you try to assist that way, it's going to be a giant failure. They're not going to want you to touch them, and they won't like what you do. It's what happens, right? You're supposed to walk up to them and you say, oh look, this is a very beautiful down dog. I wonder if there's some way that I can help them get a slightly deeper experience. And if you approach it that way, then you tend to get much better results. So like when you're doing coaching, they also say, when you coach somebody, it's not that you're trying to give them the right answers. They already have the answers. They already know what they need to do. Everybody already actually knows what they need to do. They don't want to look at it for some reason. For some reason, they're like, I'm not ready for that yet. So then you just talk to them long enough and you ask them questions, and they come around to the answer themselves. So that's what we're always trying to do with this kind of stuff. If you debate with somebody or try to show somebody the logic behind something, it's actually, we say, the syllogism is incorrect if they don't already accept the assertion and the reason. If they don't believe one of these two things, you're not allowed to give them a syllogism like that. We would say that syllogism is false. We're not trying to do that. What we want to do is look, you know this is true, and you know this is true. So why is that not true? And then they go, oh. And then you're helping people, rather than like bashing them. You know, what? You believe in God? What an idiot. How can anybody believe in God? That's retarded. You know, that's not helping anybody. You know, you say, well, what do you mean by God? Does this make sense? Could something be changing but help you? Like, that doesn't really make sense. Do you think that makes sense? Like, what could God be? What could God look like? You know? So, for my money, that's always, if I've had any success with logic, I think that it's because I've managed to keep that motivation. And the people in my life that I've seen that haven't had that motivation, eventually they always stumble and fall somewhere. They always quit or give up, or or they go to a debate and they get an answer wrong, and then they feel really embarrassed and they don't come back. It's because the motivation wasn't there. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I make mistakes all the time. But if I made a mistake, then I learned something from it, then that helps me help people, right? So, like, if you ever do try to practice debating, it's not like, I'm going to win this thing, come on, baby, let's go, it can't be like that. It has to be like, you help me, I'll help you, let's figure out what's true. And if you really approach debating that way, then like crazy, like really amazing things can happen. But if for you it's some kind of like, I'm right, you're wrong, then it doesn't really go anywhere. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I think that's good for today. If you can come tomorrow, it's the same time tomorrow, 12 to 2, 3 to 5, and we'll just do more of the same. And like I said, we'll just keep practicing this, I just so that we drill it in. And if you have syllogisms or anything that you're worried about, or like you go home and do one and it doesn't work and you can't figure it out, then you can bring it to class and we'll do it, and that's fine. Thank you. And again, if any of this is true, to think about these subjects, most people didn't spend their Saturday trying to decide if emptiness was logical or not. So you are actually in a select group of individuals. So have some joy about it. It is the people that are dedicated to these kind of things. They're very rare. So you're a member of that now. So thank you.
Is there a reading?
Sort of. You read actually the whole of reading 1 you can do if anybody wants, and it's all for free online. The reading for ACI course 13, you can do the first reading and it's okay, and there's some good stuff in there. And then the second reading will start with the some of the logic, so then skip the beginning part and the end part and just read the middle. Anything that starts with what did I say? Somebody makes the following claim. If you see that in the text, just skip it and go to the next section. Yeah, because and then like I said, hopefully I'll decode that for you at some point in the next week or weekend or whatever.
When does your book come?
And the book's supposed to get here tomorrow or Tuesday. So next Monday or next weekend, hopefully there'll be books and you can buy them, and it's much easier than this. In the book, I stick to how to be happy. So it's like how to find partners, how to find money, how to be healthy, and I mostly stick to that. So it's easier than some of these things. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll hang out for a minute if anybody wants to ask a question about something or.
I currently don't have a printer at home.